How do you define greatness? Is greatness saved only for athletes, CEOs, special forces? Or does each of us have it within to be great? Today, Fergus Connolly is here to answer those very questions. He's a world-renowned performance expert, the author of several game-changing books, and has spent his career working with corporate giants, special forces, and elite sports teams like the 49ers, Michigan Wolverines, and English Premier League's Liverpool. This is the Curiosity Blueprint, brought to you by Flying House Media. And now, let's get to my conversation with Fergus Connolly. I really sincerely want to say thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. I've really been looking forward to this conversation, and so much of I have some athletes at home in my children, and I use that as the great analogy for life. Is sports to me mirror life in so many ways. And so when this opportunity came up and when you agreed to be on this podcast, I have been vibrating, just excited to have this conversation with you, talk more about everything I've read in your book. So thank you very much for being a part of the Curiosity Blueprint.
Thank you for having me. It's funny you say that because, I tell coaches frequently that very point, or explain, remind them of that very point, that sport is a vehicle to teach young people lessons for life, whether it's, working as part of a team, overcoming failure, resilience, dedication to a particular craft and skill, winning and losing. Like, those are lessons that you get to teach young children, young people. And it's a wonderful gift. It's a blessing to be able to impact kids, whether they're your own or others.
Agreed. It's that analogy that allows us to teach lessons and point to something physical that they can relate it to and understand. So I'm curious how you define what you do. I know you're a renowned sports scientist, performance consultant, elite performance coach. I've seen a lot of different ways to describe what you do, but how would you describe what your profession is? What do you call it?
Well, fundamentally, I just love helping good people do great things. Like, at the back of it all, that's what it comes down to. I started in sport, started initially in the Premier League in England, and worked in rugby, worked in the NFL, college sport. But, and now with a lot of business leaders, executives. But fundamentally, what's most fulfilling to me is working with good people, helping them achieve things, whether it's as part of their career progression, whether it's leading a company or leading a number of companies. That's what's most fulfilling for me. And that's what I get excited about. I'm just thinking of, like two clients I had yesterday, getting off, the calls, having to finish the calls, but following up. Okay, we need to follow up on this. This is exciting. I'm as excited about what they're going to do as they are on the pathway. And so that's what I do.
Well, who are, if you don't mind my asking, who are some of the biggest names that you have worked with?
Oh, in soccer, worked with, people like Steven Gerrard, Nicolas Anelka, Joey O'Brien in soccer. In rugby, mostly with the Welsh rugby team. So guys like George North, who's probably one of the most known. Who else? Ronan O'Gara, who's now gone on to become a coach himself. Paul O'Connell in Ireland. Then the 49ers, you had like Frank Gore, Colin Kaepernick, of course, Vernon Davis, Justin Smith. Who else? There's a lot of different names. But again, having Alvin Meal was the old Chicago Bulls strength and conditioning coach when Michael Jordan was playing, and he left a voicemail, and I kick myself to this day that I didn't save it. But he used to say that the only person who made an athlete were their parents. So when I list those names, yes, I was there. I was part of it. I contributed. But I'm not taking any claim for, their wonderful achievements. You're just there to support them, in part of their journey.
So it wouldn't be safe for me to say you created Vernon Davis.
Oh, heck no. No, 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 no. Jeez,
I'm
no.
just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, no. But you know what's when you mentioned Vernon, like, I mean, I remember the first time we spoke and getting to know him. And what's funny about Vernon is I watched videos of Vernon before I came to 49ers, and he was, when he was young, he was a pretty disruptive, energetic force, I think is the polite way. And when I met him, he is the kindest, softest, nicest guy. And I remember asking him about, his career, and he couldn't have been more helpful, more insightful about, as he came into the league and learning. And it was a reminder to me that, great performers are constantly developing themselves. They don't just land and finish. The great ones truly keep evolving and developing.
I wanted to actually kind of start by asking you that is how I think greatness and excellence is on a continuum. It's something that can be defined in different ways from different people. But what you just said is really profound to me. So how do you, Fergus, define greatness?
Yeah, so I have a charter diagram. That's what I used to explain it. But you have, you start, you have good, you have great, and you have elite. And to go from good, to me, being good at anything is pretty straightforward. Like people know you do the basics, you do them very well, and you gain experience executing over time. To go from good to great takes high performance. So that means, to quote one of my colleagues, doing the right thing at the right time and knowing when to do it. That does take time. To go to truly elite then means being, the best in the world or very close to the best in the world at what you do. And each one of those stages means evolving and learning. The best example and the first example that I recognized it in was in Michael Jordan, where as he went through his career, he came into the league with hang time. Then he developed an incredible defensive ability. And then, towards the end of his career, he had a fadeaway. Those were evolutions. He didn't come in and say, I'm going to fly through the air and that's the only tool I've got. He kept developing new tools, new skills at an ability that, nobody could match. That's what it takes to be great.
Well, and how much of that is like you kind of explained that it was one thing at a time. Now I'm going to work on this. Now I'm going to work on that. And it's not this concept that of if you chase two rabbits at the same time, you're going to come away with no rabbits, right? So how much of this is physical, but how much of it is on the mental side of understanding what it's going to take from you to get yourself to that next level?
You can't truly separate them on the journey. I understand what you're saying. Like as you go through each stage, there are pros, but there are also cons to it, because at each stage it requires greater self-sacrifice, self-discipline, self-denial, if you will. And with each one of those comes a little bit of risk, because now you're narrowing down, you're excluding certain things. And you have to keep the main thing at all times. So you have to, for example, in sport, you have to win games. Like that's the ultimate measure. And so that if that's your main thing, you step backwards from that going, what do I need to do to contribute to winning games, or whether if it's an individual sport. And then it's about identifying what your strengths are and they're not weaknesses, they're areas of opportunity. You always maintain your strength. You always maintain that, because that's what got you there. That's what's going to keep you. And your job then is to limit, to reduce that, those limiting factors. So if, for example, I'll use a really simple example, but to take Tom Brady as an example, incredible quarterback, wonderful mind, incredibly tough, but became aware that perhaps some of his physical attributes were limiting factors. They were the things that were the greatest gap. Well, he worked as hard as he could to ensure that gap was closed and they weren't necessarily a weakness. Now, they were never going to be his greatest strength. He wasn't going to turn into Cam Newton and run the ball, but it never became a weakness as such. But his strength was still that resilience, that mental capacity, clarity, focus, determination. And that's what you're talking about with greatness. Great athletes never, this idea of, I took a weakness and turned it into a strength. That doesn't happen, but you close that gap. And the really good ones, really, really good ones do it so well that it's hard for you to spot where that what that weakness really is.
Yes, when you bring up Tom Brady, it just clicks for me because everybody jokes about his 40 time. He goes off for a run and it's like headline news that Tom Brady scrambled. So I get exactly what you mean. He's the greatest of all time. So what's curious to me is, how does this? You mentioned that you work now with a lot of great leaders, CEO type people. You've worked with special forces. How does this translate, this notion of everything that you teach? How does it translate to the everyman, to the everyday person who's working in a job, either an entrepreneur like myself or somebody who's working a 9-to-5? How do we take these principles of wanting to achieve greatness and put it into our own lives?
This is a really, really important point, and it came up actually in a talk I was giving recently, where recognizing those different levels, so from good to great to elite, and knowing what they are, is important because the traits of the elite are not going to transfer directly to someone who's starting out or good. And so knowing the stages that you have to go through is critical. Like I said at the beginning, to be good, you have to be very, very clear. You have to know what to do, when to do it. And you have to have a repetition of volume and prove that you can do it consistently and repeatedly. So if you're starting out in business, you keep the main thing, keep it very, very, not simple, but clear, and demonstrate that you can execute that and then gradually evolve over time. And it's that consistency and repeatability. Now, as you move through that, then you can start to, again, identify strengths, limitations, what you're going to work on. Again, keeping the main thing. One of the biggest challenges that I will come across are people wanting to jump a stage, or they'll see something or hear something or read something and want to do it, but you're jumping a stage. You know what I mean? You're skipping stages. You haven't evolved your model of performance to that level yet. And so it's having the patience, the clarity. And often that's where mentors come in. Mentors can be incredibly valuable because they can remind you what you're doing is right. Slow down, grasshopper. Let's just execute this. Let's keep executing this. And then we can start to evolve and build on it. But you're on the right path. That's why it is important to know the stages, to have a vision, know where you're going, and to slowly build on it, gradually build on it repeatedly.
Part of the reason why I was talking about the mental side of things as well is I've been excited to talk to you about these Stoicism, essentially, and these great Stoic teachings that you've included in the Happiness Handbook. It's something that I recently have been reading a lot more of, reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And you talk a lot about Epictetus in the Happiness Handbook. Mm-hmm. And what's cool about that to me is one of the things I say here all the time is control what you can control. And it seems to me that this is a real through line in Stoicism. And so I would just love to know from you, do you find that a lot of the people you work with do end up spending too much time worrying about that which they can't control?
Yeah, and this leads perfectly from your previous question, because when you know where you are and the level you're at, the stage you're at, and you control that, or you perfect those skills that you have and you're executing them, having a stoic outlook, if you will, and controlling what you control, that's critical. Then you can start to add things to it, but without, being distracted by something that's further on down the line. The other thing that is probably one of the most important skills that that anybody who aspires to be an elite or high performer is developing the ability to not be distracted and to recognize what distractions are and to not be distracted by them, which eventually leads to then worrying about those uncontrollables. I forget who said it, or, the person who came second got distracted. It could have been around, diet or lifestyle. It could have been around training. They just got distracted for a while, worried about something that was either out of their control or wasn't important. And so controlling what you can control, being clear and being aware of it, is not just an excellent guide for success. It's an excellent guide for peace as well, because you're not worrying about things that aren't really worth worrying about.
It's a hard concept to grasp, and it's something that I always have to remind myself of, because it seems to me your mind is almost wired to be, like you said, distracted by that which you can't control. So your mind just starts to wander, and it takes centering yourself to be like you said, can I control this? No. Can I move on? And I think one of the most powerful things that I've learned in reading about Stoicism is you have control over almost nothing. And to be able to, understand that and accept it, and then, again, apply that we have control over so little. I think it was Epictetus that you mentioned in your book said, the most important thing you do have control over is how you perceive things. But other than that, we don't have a whole lot of control.
Absolutely. And, he would argue that's the only thing. Even scarily enough, he would say we don't even have control over our health, which raises the question that you can influence a lot of things. Now, when you think about it, it does make sense. We all have a genetic profile or whatever. Now, we can influence it by eating well and all of these different things, but we don't have control. So the only thing that you truly have control over is how you decide to respond to things, how you decide to perceive things. It also is a good avenue to consider how we have the illusion of control. And I think many of us, perhaps as society, the idea that we're taught that we have control, when really it's an illusion. The only thing we really control is ourselves. And those people who recognize that, in my opinion, are the most secure. They're secure in who they are. They're secure in their strengths and weaknesses. They're secure in recognizing that I can decide how I want to respond to that piece of news, that comment, that interaction. And so I describe it as security. You take the power back to yourself and decide, no, I'm going to interpret this in a particular way that's positive to me. Which is just on why that's really important is when you get setbacks, or negative things, you have a moment, you have a gap, you have a moment to get angry or get annoyed or go, I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn it around. But you have a gap before you decide how you want to feel about it.
Well, it makes me think a lot about what mental toughness really is. I had an interesting moment recently because I don't know that I would ever consider myself mentally tough, but as I have practiced these concepts of controlling what I control and changing my perception of things, I'm realizing that I am getting mentally stronger. And it actually clicked for me when I was reading the Happiness Handbook, what mental toughness really is. So had somebody asked me previously, are you mentally tough? I would say, I don't know, because the way I've defined it up until now, again, has always been through my children in sports. My son's a soccer player, and I work really hard with him on when a bad play happens, move on. You can be upset about that later. Get pissed off later after the game. But right now there's another play going on. Same thing with my daughter, who's a swimmer, is being mentally tough enough to say, don't worry about who's in the lane next to you. Push yourself forward. But if I can talk about myself for a second, what happened the other day to me, I was driving into work and I got an email that was not great. a client letting me know that there were some budget cuts that were going to affect the work we're doing. And I can literally map it out in my head as it went. I had about 60 seconds of kind of grief. Damn it. I can't believe this is happening. This is terrible. After that, I had about 30 seconds of saying, but look at all these other great things that are going on. And after that minute and a half of reflecting on this moment, I wasn't even thinking about it anymore. I was on to next. I was moving through the day. And I owe a lot of that credit to my brother who helped me start Flying House, who had always taught me never get too high and never get too low. Great things are going to happen. Celebrate them quickly and move on. Bad things are going to happen. Mourn them quickly and move on. And I think what he even has no idea is that was a very stoic way of looking at things. And I realized that by repeating that to myself over the years, maybe I have gotten a little bit more mentally tough than I even thought I was.
That's a great example. And I would, again, that to me is not being distracted, like the ability to avoid distractions, whether it's an unhappy thing, like that email, or recognizing it and not being overly distracted by it, taking the lesson from it. And also, like you said, you get an email later on today, inquiring for your services, a long-term project, not being overly distracted by that and getting carried away. So it's about that ability to retain focus. And that, to me, is a huge part of mental toughness. Now, there are other things that underpin it in terms of, the vision, the goal, the value, how important it is to you and all of those things. But when you watch your kids play, for example, those things that you spoke about are reminding them what's important and not being distracted by them. Bringing things back to center, brushing them off, and ultimately being able to focus. And when you describe mental toughness, when you watch athletes, whether it's the Olympics that are going to go on or whether it's in the NFL over the weekend, what you're really describing is that ability to retain focus and avoid distractions, which could be, could be pain. It could be a physical distraction, not just, a psychological, but again, it's a distraction. Can you retain focus, or can you return to that central focus again? Mm-hmm. So you are mentally tough.
Well, that's great. Thank you. See, and now I can tell everybody that Dr. Fergus Connolly says I'm mentally tough, so deal with it.
Like, the things that you've described, though, are incredibly helpful for people just to take a moment to think about. So many of those things, you talk about mental toughness, talk about, going from good to great and pathway. We can recognize them in children. We can see those journeys, those principles by coaching our kids, hanging out with our kids, watching our kids, because we are stepped away from worrying about ourselves, but that entity is present there. So go spend time with kids and coach kids and get involved. You learn, you'll benefit from it.
And I agree with that sentiment too, being able to teach kids this, from an early age to kind of develop this mindset. But I wonder what your perspective is on this. We actually had a conversation in here does everybody have it in them to be truly great? Do you think that is something that is inherent in all of us? It's just a matter of uncovering it? Or do you feel that, and I don't suggest that not all people can be great, but do you think that drive is inherent in everybody to be great, and maybe we just haven't all uncovered it yet?
Yeah, so the way that I approach that whole space is, my key thing is, how do I help people sustain success? So whether you're going from good to great, but the first question is, what's your definition of success? So if I'm working with somebody who is like a recent mother and is planning a family, their definition of success is to move to the role of manager to ensure that their kids are raised. That's success. And to do that to the best of their ability, that's greatness. Like, that's greatness, particularly in that context. So that's always my first starting point. And I go through, or how I approach that is take the 3 Ps, which is your personal life, your personal world that you live in. So your physical and mental health, your professional world, because you have to work and interact with people to earn a living. And the third one then is your purposeful life. Like, why are you here? What are you doing it for? And so that's where we start. We look at, where those 3 Ps come together. That will help you recognize which area is in most need of support to sustain your definition of success as you define it. So that, for some people, that might be being the best athlete in the world, being the best, whatever. But my question always is, what's your definition of success? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It's what you think and what the people closest to you think.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that was something I wanted to ask you about, is that definition of success. Because I think when we hear that word initially, there's an Instagram version of success, and then there's a reality of success. In this world of social media, everything is edited to look a certain way. So it's easy for somebody who's young to think success is money and things, material things, which, again, going back to Stoicism, is this dependence on material things leads only to unhappiness. So what I've noticed over my life, I'm 45 years old now, and I think when I actually sit back and think of what success is to me, money has fallen off that list. It has literally fallen out of that picture for me. And so I think it's an interesting thing to talk about, to ask somebody, how do you define success? You might get that initial answer of, when I make this amount of money, or I have this kind of a house or this kind of a car. But I think as people start getting those, they realize it's not really fulfilling what that success is.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So I think of success as like that center of mass. That's kind of like this invisible weight that's in front of you. And if you allow others to define it, it moves further away. It moves in their direction, which tips you over. It keeps you off balance. And your goal, or one's goal, in my opinion, is this metaphorical center of mass, is to bring it back to you, gives you that sense of, or gives you that security in yourself, that stoicism that you spoke about, where you go, no, what's important is what I define success as. Like, what do I feel? How am I going to respond? When you see something, like you said, on Instagram or whatever, you've given that center of mass now away to somebody else, and that can tip you over. So what's important to you? What fulfills you? And a lot of people, one of the questions that, like, sometimes when I'm working with people, I'll say to somebody, "Oh, who are you?" And they'll say, "Oh, well, I'm a director of whatever." Or I'm John, I'm a director, or I'm Jane, I'm a director of whatever. And then I say, "Oh, brilliant. Okay, so what do you do?" I say, "Well, okay, let's go back. Let's ask you the first question. Who are you?" "Well, I'm John, I'm a father, okay. So what do you do?" And the 3 questions are, who are you? What do you do? And why are you here? Who am I? What do I work at? And what's my purpose, essentially? Personal, professional, and purposeful. And ideally, your job, I think, is that people should be able to have a pretty good answer for the 3 of those questions, to help them understand like what their definition of success is.
The why are you here is a profound one. That one's, I'm asking myself in my own head right now. I'm gonna come up with something, and I'll email it to you later. I'll see.
Yeah, well, I have a pretty good idea what field it's going to be in, because, like, I mean, you've spoken about your kids. They're obviously important. Like, I mean, that family and seeing them grow and contributing to them. But a lot of people haven't, or don't take the time, perhaps. And it's not a bad thing so long as people are content, but it's reflecting on, like, why am I here? Like, what do I feel my purpose is? And what is, you can, like, the questions you can think around are like, you as a member of a community, as a global citizen, The word legacy, I'm careful when I use that. It can be used, but I use it in the sense that you're building your legacy as you're alive. It's not what statue, how big is my statue, or what metal is it going to be made out of? That's not what I'm talking about. Is what legacy are you going to leave for others as they come, and how can you impact the world? So those are the kinds of questions that can be helpful for people in taking that, understanding what they actually do, influence and control.
Well, to go back to that center mass analogy that you used, and pulling that back towards you, is this a lot to do with? You talk a lot about this in your books about you can outwork your DNA, but it's your environment that will start to change who you are. The people you surround yourself, your concentric circles, as you call them, that. How does that all play into this environment that we build, the people we choose to spend our time with?
Yeah, it's probably one of the most important things because, so there are three things. Is it bought, taught, or caught, or is it, bought, caught, or taught? So bought as in, is it in your DNA? And your DNA gives you puts you at the starting line. Some people, it might be a little bit further ahead in some aspects. Then you have this, so that's your nature. And nurture is, how you're developed, the role models, and the family. Traditionally it would have been parents but that now has changed because, the idea of a family, can have many different connotations and variations, but that nurturing moment. So those formative years, what are the role models? What are the heroes that are praised within that group as well? Because, as you're growing up, people, friends of your parents will praise certain characters and characteristics. And as a young kid, you get drawn to those. And then finally, it's who you choose to either learn from or spend time around. So those are the three kind of buckets that become key. But we spend so much time around, or can spend time in environments, choosing the right people to spend time with is important, because so much of what we learn is subconscious and we get so much subliminal messaging. So being careful who you choose to nourish your mind with is as important as choosing what you eat and where you decide to eat. It's as, if not more important. You can't switch your brain off. You can switch your mouth off. You can push stuff away from the table. You can't switch your mind off.
Has there been a time in your life where perhaps you found yourself including people in your environment that weren't helpful? A time when you felt like maybe you were choosing the wrong people to bring into your circle?
Oh, yeah. And it can happen. It very often happens unconsciously, particularly when you're in driven environments and you're working towards something. And so it has happened, of course, like particularly in sporting teams where there's an awful lot of competition, but perhaps the values aren't aligned. The best teams that I've been with have had the values are common, they're shared, and there isn't an undercurrent that's bothering you. So the best way that I can describe it is, if you're standing, on a beach or on a hilltop looking out over the water, and you're watching the waves coming crashing in, when the water and the day is good and the wind's blowing nice and calm, you might see a little ruffle occasionally further out in the ocean, because that's where the ground varies. But those are the values. That's that surface underneath. The values must align. You only see those breaks in the ocean when the wind picks up, and that's where you see and so when you're in different teams, the most important thing is asking yourself, do our values align, or do my values align with the people that are here? And I've been part of teams, I've been part of organizations where they didn't align. I didn't recognize it. I've been part of some brilliant teams where the values did align, And those are some of the happiest, most content environments I've been around, where you can, like, I remember walking out after like staff meetings or backroom team meetings, and the comment would be, I didn't mean any offense by that. And the guy is like, and you've just because you were having an argument about a particular aspect of performance, and you knew that person and you equally didn't care about anything else other than getting the right result. And you were happy to argue. You were happy to have that constructive debate. Never crossed your mind that it was personal or anything else, because the values are aligned. Being honest, being open, and knowing that person's values, their goal, are the exact same as yours. And that's brilliant. When you've that circle of trust, closed room, and you can argue things out to reach that. That's the beauty of a high performing team. It's really good. It's that, you know what it's like, when you work with great people and they argue, like, now we're getting somewhere. And once it's done, you know that together, all we're interested in is winning together. That's beautiful.
It is a good point when you do see people arguing, and in the end, the ability to recognize that our goal is the same, that you can move on from that argument is really, really powerful. It doesn't always happen, but the people that can recognize that and say, in that moment, we were at each other's throats, but we're both working towards the same thing.
Yeah, I'll work with lots of teams, at the very beginning, the most important thing for me is to make clear, I want you to debate. I want you to challenge, what we're working on. Or if I say something, I want you to challenge, because I have ideas and I think they're right, but they're not going to be right if you don't challenge them for me. If you see, how is that going to work? And it doesn't necessarily have to start out as that's wrong or I disagree. It might be, hey, Fergus, Jason, hey, tell me a little bit more about that, because I'm not sure. Just talk me through what you're thinking. Oh, okay, I get you. Yeah, that could work. Or no. What about in this scenario? Is that going to work? Like, that's now you're knocking the edges off things. You're smoothing it out. You're refining. You're creating a robust solution that can either go to market or that you can bring. And if you don't have that in a team, if you don't have that in a group, your opponent, your competitor, the public are going to, it's too late then. You want to do all of that in-house. And when you get that, it's a beautiful feeling, because together now you're producing something. Those are the best teams, the best environments, and the best people to be around.
And approach is everything. We talk about that a lot here too, is that you can disagree in many different ways, and that approach changes the environment, changes the temperature of a room drastically. If you go in saying, that'll never work, I'm not doing that, is very different from saying, like you said, explain to me why you see this working, and perhaps providing reasons why it doesn't. So that approach changes everything.
And also from your perspective, like when you go to present something, it's probably best to be on the front foot. Like the line that I will use if I'm putting something together is tell me why this won't work, or break this for me, because you're inviting it. Then, okay, let's go. Let's pull this apart. Like that's what you want. You want people to challenge it. The worst thing is silence, because nobody's, I think it was Colin Powell once said, if everybody says yes, it means nobody's thinking. You want people to challenge it, to poke holes. Mikhail Zenko has written an excellent book about red teaming, about going through the process of pulling things apart from within before you go external, and so those are wonderful moments, because you've put time and effort, or somebody has, into producing a solution, but now you make it better with more input, and nothing's personal. This thing's in the middle of the table for our team or for our company or for a group, and we want to make this better. Let's go. Let's pull it apart.
This all leads me to something that I've been wondering about, and I think my team and I even disagreed about this very question that I wanted to ask you. Is I think I've always defined greatness in a very specific way, and that is, it's the things you do when no one watches that makes you great. It's waking up at 4 a.m, not just because, but because you want to get a jump. You want to get ahead of everybody. And there was this great commercial spot years ago that Michael Phelps was in, where it said, "It's what you do in the dark that puts you in the light." And so I agree with all of that very much. And that's kind of been a mantra for me. However, in reading your books and in talking with my team, is the question that has popped up to me is, can you be great without somebody else? Do we need that community to support us to achieve greatness? And I'm curious your thoughts, having worked with teams and, coaches and, great leaders. Is it possible to achieve greatness in a vacuum, or do you need others to help you?
Yeah, I don't know I can't point to anyone who has achieved true greatness on their own. They've always had a support system of sorts. Now, in some cases, that's an incredible family support system that is private, that you may or may not be aware of, and that person may appear to be, to do it on their own. But as you get to know that great person, which of course, as they become great, it becomes harder to find out, but they generally have a support system of sorts that they can rely on. Or it could be professional, it could be a combination. But to achieve true greatness, you have to have a support system. You have to have people around you. Now, you either have it, or the greats will go and find it as well. Like, that's another trend, that great people go and find either mentors, coaches, people. And it very often isn't one. You could have 3 or 4 in different areas, and you have like a kind of like a toolbox that you go, I'm struggling with this aspect of my life. That's the best person for me to go and bounce that around with. And very often all you're looking for is somebody with an outside perspective who's going to be honest with you and is going to challenge you. Very often. But all great performers, great athletes have coaches and or mentors, who support them and who provide an outlet for some of those questions and challenges. All of the great players did have, in some shape or form. Some of them had wonderful, say, family support. Others who didn't have family support had a great childhood community or group of friends that they could rely on. So the principle was always present as an example. So that's what you start out looking for. Or what in my case was, what does it take to be great? What are the traits? You realize there's no perfect recipe, but there are recipes, and that will thrive in certain environments. And you keep refining your understanding of that.
Yeah. As you do find these traits of greatness, like you said, there's a lot of different paths to it. Has there been a through line where you can say the greats have these 3 qualities? What are those? What are the qualities, I would ask, of a great leader, of a great athlete, a great CEO? What are those qualities that you notice most often in people who are great?
The 3 core ones are Triple H, hard work. The 3 are hard work, humility, and honesty. And when I say hard work, I mean quality work. So when you watch somebody who truly achieves greatness, they have moments of incredible quality focused work. So they will, now they might not get up at 4 a.m., but they might stay late or whatever. So this idea but there will be moments, or when they're practicing or they're working on their own or they're in their office, there will be moments of extreme quality work. And that's one separator. It's not how much time they spend. Now, so if we just take an athlete, for example, they may spend a lot of time practicing, and some people might look and go, they spent 6 hours there today. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for the blocks of real quality work where they're completely immersed in learning a skill or focused. So that's key. The second one is humility. Now, again, you'll watch athletes play and you'll see them score and celebrate, or in press conferences, they might say things and you think, oh, they're arrogant. So humility doesn't have a place. But in their private moments, when they come to the locker room or they come in the morning or you meet them in the morning, that's where you see the humility. And that humility is the driver to get better. So, Muhammad Ali, for example, I am the greatest. But when he, started training camp, he didn't truly believe he was the greatest. He was honest enough to know, this is what I got to do. This is how hard I have to work. So that honesty is critical to be able to, that humility is critical to be able to avoid complacency, getting carried away. And then finally, honesty, the honesty to be able to look in the mirror and go, this is what I'm good at. This is what I'm not so good at. And I'm going to improve that, so that you don't get carried away and that you don't have any blind spots. So hard work, humility, and honesty. Those are the three things that, like I said, the humility one gets people because they'll say, you'll talk about somebody maybe that, an athlete, and they'll say, oh, they're not humble, they're arrogant. And I go, yeah, maybe publicly, but that's what they're presenting. But I'm telling you, when they wake up Monday morning at, 6 o'clock in the morning and they go, training and practicing on their own, or running a hill on their own when the sun hasn't come up, you telling me that they're arrogant? No, that's humility. They know, but you don't see that bit. That's the bit you don't see. So yeah, hard work, that hard quality work, that humility to know where they are, not get carried away, and then that honesty to be able to look at themselves and go, this is something I need to work on. I need to suffer a little bit. This is something I don't like doing it, but I have to do this.
Well, I think one thing too, that people might get intimidated by even this conversation of what greatness is, because the question may be, how do I work this hard towards this? Getting up early, working hard, learning how to be the best teammate, learning how to lead people. How do I find time for my own life, for my personal life, or how do I marry these two things? So how does work-life balance play into this so that it's not such an intimidating venture to try and be great? Yeah.
So again, the definition of success is like, what's your definition of success? I have lots of friends, colleagues, people I've worked with who I regard as great, like truly great in what they do. Like there are people who, like I remember I worked with one person at one of the huge, top 5 biggest corporations. But I'll never forget they did something or presented something. And I remember telling them that what you did and what I was part of and helped coach, and that to me was one of the proudest and most fulfilling moments for me. Forget about NFL, soccer, rugby. That gave me more happiness than so many of those other things. And so greatness, like I said, can be a mother and a housewife. To me, that's greatness. Doing it well is greatness. And the principles apply in terms of hard work. There are moments of hard work, improving oneself, being humble, not getting carried away, and then being honest about, okay, I need to do this. I need to take care of these things. And so the greatness has so many different forms, and we can get distracted by sporting greatness or whatever else, but greatness is in being the best that you can be at what you decide is important, your definition of success. And it's not for me, it's not for anybody else to tell you what that is. And so you're right, sometimes people get intimidated, and a large part of, it's a key part of my work is helping people understand that it's not the technique, it's the principle that applies. Because when I worked in soccer and then worked in rugby, I didn't take the techniques, it was the principles, refine the principles. It's the principles that matter. The technique is always going to be different. So for some people, it might be staying up a little bit later because that's what works for them. They're an owl. They're larks like you and I who get up early. We don't. It's not fun, but that's what we do to do a little bit more. So it's being comfortable knowing what works for you and finding that.
Yeah, and I think too, the part of that definition is understanding what you're willing to sacrifice. If you're willing to sacrifice sleep.
Yes.
For me, that those early morning hours are so important because I don't have the guilt of not spending time with my kids because I'm down in my office working. And that's the biggest driver for me, is that's how I find a way to achieve balance, because nobody is expecting anything from me at 4:00 in the morning. So I can just expect from myself and not feel guilty about that. So I think that's what I came to terms with, was I couldn't add any time on to the end of the day. So I was going to add time on to the beginning of the day. And I promised that my kids are never going to wake up at 4 because they're all out of diapers. So at that point, 4 a.m. doesn't even exist to them anymore. So I think that's an important part of it too, is understanding to get what you want, it often comes with sacrifice. And like you said, it's up to you to decide what is a sacrifice that you're willing to make that doesn't make you sacrifice the principles of who you want to be.
A wonderful point. I have a good friend who to this day thanks me for asking him a very simple question was, what price are you prepared to pay? He was asking for advice on going a particular career route, and I explained to him he was very capable of it. He was, getting married shortly, and I had asked him the question, like, what price are you prepared to pay? Because you can in theory do anything, but are you prepared to pay the price, and what are you prepared to sacrifice? And that doesn't make you a good or a bad person. That's a question you have to, back to honestly answer. And so when you get your priorities right and know what's important to you, then you can determine what you're prepared to sacrifice.
I would love to talk a little bit about something that has bothered me for a long time. And I read about this a lot in your book, which is why I felt like it's the perfect time to discuss this. And it's the word authenticity. Authenticity does not bother me. Don't get me wrong there. But I think that this has become such a buzzword, in particular in my field and what we do. I spend a lot of my time, as you know, sitting down and having conversations with people on camera. And a lot of times when I'm sitting across from somebody, it's either because they've had a horrible experience with their health, or they're on the other side of a horrible experience and came out stronger. But it requires a lot of vulnerability and a lot of trust in me that it's okay to share this part of them. And to me, that is authenticity, when somebody is able to, I think you had said it in your book, it's when the outward appearance of you matches with who you are on the inside. I'm butchering that, but something along those lines. And so the part of it that bothers me is we see this word authenticity used a lot, but it's not necessarily an authentic use of the term. To me, authenticity is that ability to be vulnerable, but I can't make you be authentic. What I can do is create an environment where you're comfortable being authentic with me. So that's my little rant of something that has always bothered me, but I like what you talk about with authenticity. And you take this great path in getting there and explaining that the 3 types of people are wolves, sheep, and sheepdogs. And so I say all of that to bring you back to it. Would you mind sharing with me your concept of wolves, sheep, and sheepdogs, and how all of that kind of leads into authenticity?
For me, it started with the word vulnerability. Vulnerability is again incredibly important, but was being overused, and then people latched onto authenticity. So the way that I describe it to people is authenticity is where you have a scar. You can show someone a scar, like something you fell, and you can talk about an embarrassing moment or something that at a particular time was weakness. Vulnerability is showing someone an open wound. The scar is no threat to you. A wound is. a wound can be exploited. And actually the word vulnerability comes from, I think, the Latin for, not going to speak Latin, but comes from the actual word Latin for wound. And that's the difference. So you're absolutely right. People will talk about being authentic, but that's very different from being vulnerable. Vulnerable is presenting something to you that could be used against them. And that's an incredible, demonstrates an incredible trust in you. Authenticity is being able to talk about who you are and present yourself without doing that, which, you know, a lot of teams I'll work with or leaders that say, "Oh, we want to be really vulnerable." Let's start with being freaking authentic first. Can we get that far? You know, can we just talk about that? Now, elite teams, very elite groups can reach moments or can become vulnerable, and that you aspire to, but it's very rare. You know, when you think about, like, it's very rare that somebody will come and share things that can be used against them. So the goal is to be authentic. So the wolves, sheepdogs. So it's David Grossman wrote about it. He's a law enforcement. I guess he's a consultant now, but he told the story about how you have sheep, wolves, and sheepdogs, and he talked about it in society, and spoke about how obviously in life there will be perhaps some moments, not necessarily people, but there can be moments that can be a threat to us, wolves. And then there are sheep, people who throughout society and community need to be protected, and hence why you have sheepdogs or wolfhounds, as we call them in Ireland. And so that it's an important or helpful metaphor for understanding the people that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, in your case, you have sheep, you've got kids who can't necessarily look after themselves first, and they will, and you will in the community encounter wolves. Like, can be difficult moments, can be difficult people or challenging people, and so then you will assume the role of sheepdog to protect them and to look after them. But I think the starting point for people is to start with authenticity, to be authentic. And I describe being authentic as when your identity and your image are as close as possible, they overlap. So you would have far many better examples than I would with your background, but people present an image on camera and on TV. The people who you probably have the greatest experience with as a whole, from meeting them to leaving, are probably those who are most authentic, where their image and their identity are most similar, because you're not speaking to two people. It's not like a split personality. Now, that also poses a problem, though, for that celebrity or famous person, because sometimes they can forget that their image is an image and can get distracted trying to live up to that image, which can lead into so many problems. You see it in sport occasionally, but it's quite common with famous people, where they work hard to create this image, which starts to take off, and they're very sure of their identity and who they are. But as that starts to take off, if they forget which is which, that then can be a challenge for them, because they try and live up to their image, not their identity. And that can cause a lot of confusion, disappointment, insecurity, and can lead to a lot of challenges for them.
Well, I want to say first that the analogy you just gave, the definitions of authenticity versus vulnerability, I've never heard that before, and that was great. I might steal it, so just a heads up on that.
Sure,
but,
go ahead.
I really love that. That paints such a clear picture. That's a wonderful analogy. You know, one of the most important parts of this podcast and why we're doing it, everything that we do, both for work and life, we talked about it before, it comes down to people. and the way we connect with one another, the way we impact one another. Like you said, we can't be great without other people. We can't inspire greatness by not understanding how to connect with people. And again, I go back to what Epictetus said in his Stoic teachings, that human connectedness is one of the most valuable things we have. So what have you learned in your professional life, in your personal life, about the importance of truly connecting with somebody else, and not only what it takes, but the impact it can have on who we are?
Wow. I think that has been something that I was aware of, explored, and tried to find answers for all through my career. But I think it's really only in the last, say, 7 or 8 years that I've started to understand more about what that actually means. And if you watch a team, the example I'll give is, if you watch a team who are playing in sync together, whether it's a great basketball team, great ice hockey team, great football team, people say, oh, they're telepathic, or they know. That's that form of, it's taking sport to an art form between two people. And so it's that level of connectedness. And that happens on an emotional level, an intuitive level. And that's where you see it actually in older couples, and again, there's so many wonderful older people out there in the community or profession that people ignore, don't go to learn from, which is a whole other area we could go into. But you see it in people who have spent a lot of time together. They intuitively anticipate what the other person is going to say or going to do. And that level of connectedness is so, so important. And it comes about, though, through spending very emotionally charged moments with people. So in order to learn about people, you have to spend these emotionally charged moments. It could be celebration. It's not suffering necessarily. But when you spend those moments where you and they are fully present and you're working towards something, you're engaged in something, that builds patterns in your brain that are incredibly charged, and they will go off. You keep refining those. And that's ultimately what you're trying to get, like in a basketball team, ice hockey team, soccer team that are working together in sync. They compete, win and lose together, and they develop this connectedness where they will celebrate and win and lose together. And it's an emotional connection. It's not something that is prescriptive, analytical. It's on an emotional level where you can anticipate. And if I asked you to describe it about somebody else, you couldn't do it. So imagine somebody that you've worked with for a long time, when you're out this way. When they would come through the door, before they said a word or said anything, you knew what kind of mood they were in within 2 steps. Because you've spent emotionally charged moments working together and fully invested. That's where it comes from. That's that human connectedness. That's that learning. And that's the beauty of a team. And other people will say, how did you know that? And you'd say, well, and you like at the start, you'd think, how did I know that? And then I got it. But that's that level that you're really trying to get to, particularly in teams.
I'll tell you that while you're talking about this, so Josh, who's a member of a team and a really great friend of mine, is sitting just behind camera, and he gave me a look as you're talking about this, because there are so many times throughout our days, we've worked together for years, we're family. I mean, Josh and I know each other. We know what kind of mood each other's in from the moment we see each other. But the one thing that Josh always says to me is like, get out of my brain. Because I will say something that he was just about to say a split second before, or vice versa. And it is this, like, we are wired to be connected because we have gone through the ups and downs together. We've experienced so many things together. And again, I had mentioned it before, but we also just had this expert in integrative medicine come on and tell us about a study where you take two people and you put them in separate Faraday boxes where it blocks out all light, all electromagnetic waves. And in one of the boxes, you flash a light and see if the other person picks it up. Now, on two people that don't know each other, there is no response when you flash a light in one of those boxes. There's no response in the other box. But now you take two people that have had the time to get to know each other on even just a small level, let alone somebody you've known for years. You take two people that have a connection, put them in separate boxes, flash a light in one, and they're able to pick up the patterns in the brain in the person in the other box. And that science to me is absolutely amazing, that you can be so connected to somebody that you can separate them completely, and yet you're still having an impact on each other. And to me, that to me is what's so valuable in life. That's why your biological family can be so important, but that's also why your logical family can be so important. The people you choose to bring into your circle that are so connected with you that your brain waves will literally sync up, but that will be there with you when they need to pick you up just as much as they will when they're there to celebrate with you. So that entire notion of this human connectedness is, for me, when I look back, call it successes, call it failures, whatever it is, I wouldn't have gotten to any of these places had I not had those people that I was truly connected with on a deep, deep level.
And the lesson or the reminder for people is, you only achieve that if you invest yourself, and whether or not they're successes or failures, they're incredible learning moments. So, for example, Josh and yourself have to commit to something to have that emotionally charged moment. Like, the outcome could be a huge success, could be a failure, but you've committed, you've had that emotionally charged moment where you're present. That's where the learning, the connectedness comes. But if you don't commit to anything, you don't do anything, you're never going to have that. So you have to commit and start with being authentic to begin with, and eventually vulnerability. But you have to commit, like, you have to take chances. And that's one of the things that with people when they make decisions, and I make a point of praising people as often as I can. I don't often care whether you win or lose. I'm so proud that you actually were courageous enough to take a chance, because so many people don't. So many people won't do something, don't want to. The fact that you made a decision and tried it or went for it, that's huge. So many people don't. So many people don't make those decisions.
Well, I think a lot of this too, when you talk about, going through emotionally charged events with somebody, it makes me think of ego and how much ego can get in the way of so many things. It's kind of this ability to release your ego and let somebody else in and take a part in your path to greatness. Do you see, again, working with athletes, the outside perception is the locker room is just filled with a million different egos. What takes a great coach is the one that can silence the egos and bring us together as one unit. But how does ego play a role to you in our path to success, to happiness, to anything?
It's ego is important to be successful. Like, you have to have a certain amount of, self-belief, self-esteem. But again, I go back to finding that security in oneself, and starts with, I even go deeper, starts with self-love. Like, you mean truly loving who you are, having esteem and self-worth. And self-value as well. Value to me is an incredibly important thing, in that, and I would argue that value as a concept is one of the most important things. In other words, valuing who you are, truly valuing it. Because, a lot of people will struggle with self-esteem. Some people have an excessive amount. But when people talk about worth, that to me is ego. Worth is what somebody will pay for it, or what you will charge someone for your time or whatever. That's worth. But value is what it actually gives to someone. So you can be present with someone and add a lot of value, okay? Or you can be present with someone and not add a lot of value, but the worth was high. And so the value is the most important thing, I think, to think about and to help to have that security in yourself, how the value that I bring and recognizing the value. And the reason that I say that is, and you'll appreciate this, in certain, domains or communities, people are only seen as a commodity, or they're commoditized, or they have a worth. And sometimes they themselves lose an understanding of what their true value is as people. So they only see themselves in terms of what people will pay for, or contract them for, or whatever. And they've lost their own understanding of what their true value is, which, might be turning up, spending time with someone. You see that in the entertainment industry quite frequently, at different points. And it can be sad, to see some of the consequences. But it starts with having an understanding of your value and separating that from one's worth. So ego is important. You need to have a healthy amount of it.
Well, before I continue, well, I just want to say what a great way to explain worth and value. That's another little aha moment you gave me. So thank you very much for that. So this is something that I'm noticing that you're exceptionally good at, and that is delivering information in a way that kind of makes things click. That's what I was just noticing with value and worth, the way you describe authenticity versus vulnerability. And it brings me to leadership, which is something that I, as somebody who runs a company, find a great deal of value in learning more and more each day about how to lead people better, what that really means to be a leader. And something that you talked about is it doesn't matter what you know if you can't sell it to the people you're trying to tell. And I think you're showing that you're excellent at that, just in your ability to explain simple concepts. But can you talk to me about that a little bit? Is there this quality that you've noticed in the leaders you've worked with, where they not only understand the goal and the purpose of a project, a company, whatever, but they really understand how to amplify it?
Yeah. So, leadership is interesting. Like, you can be a brilliant leader of even a sports team, but not be a good coach and not be a great coach. And you can still be successful. Like, leadership is a quality in and of its own. Like, there are, I've worked with a few well-known coaches who I would regard as great leaders, but not necessarily great coaches or poor at managing people. But equally, I've worked with some brilliant coaches, for example, in sport, who know the sport exceptionally well, but they couldn't lead you to the door of the office. So there are different qualities that are needed. I think leadership is, you're absolutely right. One of the most important things in leadership is being able to identify. Sometimes the goal itself is already identified, but identifying a vision that people can be part of, a really aspirational vision, but explaining it in a way to everybody that they can feel part of and contribute to it. And that, I guess, as part of communication, is explaining it in a way that people want to be excited about it, see a part of it, and want to contribute to it. And then there are the behaviors of leading themselves, how they lead. The other really important aspect is narrative, because you can't just, declare a vision, explain it to people, and then, head home. You have to continue to reinforce the narrative and ensure that that's being maintained consistently, so that people, when things get tough, for example, remember or are reminded why we're doing this. And the other thing that I think is critical or the best leaders I've seen, they care about the person, not the professional, or they show an interest, at least, in the person, not the professional. When you hire people who generally can do a job, or you train them up to do a job, or they have a skill set. your job is to actually inspire and encourage them enough that they self-fulfill that. It becomes they become this self-propelling machine, because you want people who love what they do and want to be the best at what they can do, no matter what that task is. So you help with the vision and the narrative, and you try and support the person. So it's like lifting handbrakes so they can get excited about this thing. And you want them to be so good at what they do that somebody comes looking, can I hire that person? But it's the way I describe it is stay out of the middle as a leader. Stay out of the middle. And ultimately, it's the difference between management and leadership. A manager is somebody who knows your task better than you do, and so they'll teach you and coach you up. A leader is different. Leader is the vision, or the goal, the vision, the narrative, and then just checking in on the person. I'm not saying you interfere in it, but you check in on the person. How's the person doing? Are they happy? Are they comfortable? And stay back. That's it. Get out of their way. Get out, and you facilitate. And again, you facilitate greatness for that person in that task or that responsibility that they have. That's how I see leadership of the best leaders that I've been around. I would regard great leaders, world-class leaders, as world-class facilitators. And I draw the hierarchical diagram upside down so that the leader's actually at the bottom and they're facilitating greatness.
It's all interesting. It's something that so much of what you're saying resonates with me a lot, in that clearing a path in particular is that great difference between a leader and a manager to me. And I think what I've learned over the years, taking a company that started with just me working at a computer at my kitchen table to, we're not a huge company. We're still a small company, but I get to work with a team now. And we have this great team that is all very invested, and they all believe in what we're doing. And I think I have to work that muscle so differently, where there are times that I do need to be a manager, and there are times that I need to shift over and be a leader. And those muscles are so incredibly different. Whereas, like you said, the manager understands the task at hand and what it takes, and knows how to put the organization in place to make this happen, to facilitate that. But when it comes time to lead, to be the leader, it is very much of understanding what each person leads to want to be a lead, understanding what each person needs to want to be a leader in their own right at what they are doing. So I try and be that true north of making sure we know we're all working towards this one goal, and here's what's exciting about it. But then also just stepping back and saying, now you get to be a leader in what you're focusing on right now. When you call it, and I think that's such an important part for me, is that I think when I look past in my career, when I was the least happy was when I lost that focus because I was being micromanaged. Somebody was looking at me as a button pusher. This is what I need, and here's how you're going to do it. And so when I started this company, those bad experiences kind of changed the way I wanted this one to be, where I don't want to tell you how to do it. I want to make sure you understand what we're trying to do. And now you show me why you're going to make it better. Because I can't do everything. The team I'm surrounded with, there's a million things each one of them can do better than I can. So I always think, why would I stifle that greatness in them, that ability in them, by telling them how to do it? Instead, I just want to make sure they know this is the task at hand. How are you going to make it great?
You're 100% right. You want, and I can't describe it to you. I'll send you an image. It's exactly what you're talking about. You, as a leader, you dip into like management facilitation, and early on with a company, those periods are a little bit longer because you spend a little bit longer in the management phase with someone, and then you facilitate. And that's what leadership is. Now, when you get to the top, or as you become great, those moments are less frequent and they're shorter because just checking in and you're bouncing ideas off. But at the start, it might be a little bit longer, spending time. And so that's that pathway to greatness for leadership, particularly as you're getting a group off the ground. And the other thing that what you described perfectly is everybody is an expert, and you want to encourage them to be an expert in their space. You want them to value again what they do, and to love and value the value that they are giving, to somebody else or to the company and contributing. Because fundamentally, that's how you demonstrate that someone is valued. We're working on this together. This is your responsibility. I want you to produce this. I value what you're going to do for us. And you can't do that by interfering, telling them what to do, micromanaging them. Can't do that. And as you said, you want them to do, those things better than you could ever do them, and that's where then you get to ask questions about, how did you do that? I would have never thought of doing that. Tell me why have you set it up this way? And that's when you start to get that going. That's beautiful then. And then they will come and challenge you and ask questions. And that's a very important moment. If you ever lose that, you've either intimidated them or they don't care. So you have to value them, appreciate them, so that they will do that. But the day that people stop coming, challenging you or asking questions, you've got bigger problems.
I know what to look out for now. My brain just started scrambling. I'm like, who hasn't been challenging me lately? Well, I flip this all back to something you said earlier, and I want to turn it on you, if that's all right. I would love to know from you, Fergus, who are you? What do you do, and why are you here?
Well, why I'm here is to help good people do great things. That's my purpose. That's what I get the most fulfillment from. What I do is I work with leaders, whether it's in sport, military, and business, and help them develop other leaders within themselves. And who I am, I'm a glorified Irish carpenter. That's what I am. I started out actually to become a woodwork teacher in a small village in Ireland. That's a few years ago now, but that's where I started. So my friends used to joke, a woodwork construction studies teacher, so you're a glorified carpenter. But that's where it all started. I grew up during the 80s in Ireland, and here I am now in LA. There's been a few twists and turns. It's not over yet either. Keep going for another while.
It's only just begun, Fergus. Well, I'll end and give you back the rest of your Friday. But my one last question, and this is a question I like to ask everybody, is for that one pearl of wisdom. So we have an audience that's either watching or listening right now who may be asking, what are the next steps? How do I take this and practically bring it into my own life? So if you had to give advice, what could somebody do that's listening? What could somebody do right now to start them on a path towards being great, being elite, being the best at what they can do?
The most important thing, simplest thing, is to recognize that they are great in what they are doing. And it's about refining that. It's not about saying, I want to change career or whatever. It's about being great in the world that you are in. Because I can't tell you TV or whatever. That's not, you're going to live this world, this life, and be great in that. If you're a mother, if you're a father, if you're an accountant with 2 kids, or you're an engineer with 5 kids, or you're whoever, no kids, it's about being great in that life itself. I'm not here to judge you. Nobody else is here to judge you. It's about being great in that life. And that's the most important thing. I've a good friend who once reminded me, and I think it was St. Thomas Aquinas said, comparison is the thief of joy. So don't worry about anybody else. Just be great in your world. And back to what we spoke about earlier, define your success and be great in it.
That's excellent. Fergus, I can't thank you enough. This has been
this has been great.
I mean, longer than you expected, thank you. But I mean, I could go on and on. So we may have to continue the conversation at some point. But
we'll do the next one when I come to Chicago.
There we go. That would be perfect. I'll have you come in here and I'll let you ask me questions. I asked you a lot of questions this time.
Yeah.
If you have any questions you want to ask me, I'll let you fire away right now if you want. Otherwise, we could save it for the next one.
I do have some questions, but there would be we'll spend some time talking first, and
right.
Then I do have questions.
Well, I can't, like I said, I can't thank you enough. This has been excellent. It's all stuff that I love talking about. So I appreciate you being so gracious with your time and offering a little insight for us.
Thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right. I'll talk to you soon, Fergus. My conversation with Fergus has left me thinking about a lot of things, both in my life and in my career. The value we must place in those we choose to surround ourselves with, what it means to be a leader, and how greatness can be defined by no one but ourselves. I hope our conversation provided value to even one of you out there listening. And if you've made it this far, I want to thank you for being curious. If you haven't already, hit the like and subscribe button to join us in our weekly conversations and become a part of our community.